Hi. All right, I'm moving myself, sorry. So now we're going to discuss depression as our next stress and emotion. So first, this is talking about depression as I'm feeling depressed, in a depressed mood. It's a feeling of hopelessness, helplessness. I put faint there in with a question mark just because, in the fight or flight, freeze or faint, we have fight being more corresponding to anger, flight with fear. So I just wonder if depression is more faint, meaning kind of a withdrawal and moving away from the living of life in a way. So the diathesis-stress model of depression just means that stress leads to depression in some people. I think if we think about that physiologically, too much cortisol running in the system um, can sort of dampen the functioning system in a way, can overload it to a point where it flattens um, positive feeling in life. And so I think that certainly that can happen. And so, but we have to talk about at what point does a depressed mood, I'm feeling down, I'm feeling depressed, I'm having this, maybe situational, some things happened, leaving me feeling that way, a breakup or hard time in a class or something like that. So when does that become a problem? Something to be diagnosed uh, as a disorder. So then we'll talk a little bit about that. Major depressive disorder is a mood disorder, so we call a mood disorder, separate from anxiety disorders, a different category of diagnosis. And for depression to be clinically diagnosed, there needs to be a depressed mood and significant loss of pleasure lasting most of the day, every day, for at least 2 weeks. Certainly bordering, if not into, a lack of functioning within everyday life because of this difficulty in getting up. I keep having to pause, and I don't know if you can tell, but anyway, so even a loss of positive functioning within life and in difficulty getting out of bed, a difficulty getting things done that need to get done. I include most, but does not have to be all of these things, daily insomnia or hypersomnia, meaning sleeping too much or not sleeping at all, um, significant weight loss or gain, fatigue, feelings of worthlessness, inappropriate guilt, poor concentration, reoccurrent suicidal thoughts. So if somebody was trying to diagnose this, they would look for these things as well as it lasting 2 weeks or more. 16.6% lifetime prevalence. That means 16.6% of the population will experience major depressive disorder at some point in their life. Mid-20s, average onset. Females much more likely to be diagnosed. Is that perhaps because males don't seek to talk to someone or tell someone about it or help? I don't know, but that seems to be what we can see in the literature. Those with chronic or severe medical conditions more likely to experience depression. If you're going through something that just doesn't go away and wears on the body, the body can follow the mind can follow the body, right? So we can slump if we're feeling down. Our posture can show our emotions and how we're doing. But also, if we're feeling, if we're feeling bad, if we have um, something that happens, a chronic illness or a disability or something that comes on at some point, then after that there might be a period certainly of increased depression. Low self-esteem and ruminative thinking are vulnerability factors. That means just factors that can lead to this. If we tend to ruminate on problems and things going on worries that we have, on stressors, can lead to this. And it leads to chronic stress. It leads to stress hormones and so forth, low self-esteem. Up to 15% of those diagnosed commit suicide. So that was in 2000. That's a big number, I think, especially since hopefully there are ways that we can successfully at least help people navigate this. Um, and hopefully those numbers can get better. So just some treatment. Again, I'm not going majorly into these disorders and so forth, but just some things to let you know about. There are certainly pharmacological treatments. SSRIs, SNRIs, and Wellbutrin are three of those, the drugs that they use for major depression. Behavioral therapy, interpersonal psychology, and CBT, which are all meant to motivate individuals to be more engaged in positive activities. So when I talked about positive psychology and how 40% of our happiness can be intentional activities or practices that we do, these are types of therapies that are meant to motivate individuals to take part in them and to find those things that can help inspire positive action and feeling in life, to combat the tendency to withdraw and stop engaging. So I had a professor who used to say, well, he used to say therapy lies in the opposite direction. And I think healing lies in the opposite direction. And what that means is I was thinking about this. I've had a cold, right? So when we have a cold, what do? We nurture ourselves. We eat well, we rest, we stop. And so when it's difficult, because then what do we do when we're feeling anxious or depressed? We don't necessarily, what I would say is give in to those feelings, acknowledge them, think of them as very real, be kind to them. And at the same time, it's like if depression is moving people to want to withdraw and stop engaging in life, the answer is certainly not to withdraw and stop engaging in life, even though that's what we would be drawn to do. So we have to move in the opposite direction to some extent of what that is. Just like with anxiety, we need to move in the direction of calming the self, finding things that bring peace and well-being, and for depression, finding things that bring joy. Even though I know that sounds simplified, but the practices that can lead to that over time. So we've talked about these a little bit, but social skills training, that's the interpersonal psychology. How do we have assertiveness? Are we able to feel comfortable with people? CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, challenge negative thinking patterns about the self, the world, and the future. Challenge maladaptive and automatic negative thoughts and errors in thinking. So I want to go dig a little bit more into what that looks like. So I just want to share this with you, 15 styles of distorted thinking. You can find different ones named. This has a lot of the most common that we hear about, and I'm not going to go through all of these. I would strongly suggest that you look at the PowerPoint and read these through and so forth. But picking out a couple of these, catastrophizing is certainly very common. You expect disaster, you notice or hear about a problem and start what ifs, what if tragedies, what if this happens to you? And that can even be things like catastrophizing getting up late. Oh my goodness, I'm going to be late, and then I'm going to get fired, and then I'm going to not have any money coming. It's like it snowballs into larger and bigger things. Um, Personalization, thinking that everything people do or say is some kind of reaction to us, like having anything that goes on, seeing it filtered as and referencing ourselves with it. Though often it really has nothing to do with us. Um, Kind of shoulding all over ourselves, of a list of ironclad rules about how you and others should act. And so that can be very difficult for others to always fit into, for ourselves to fit into. So these kinds of thinking can then lead us to anxiety or depression. They lead to ruminative thinking. They lead to all the things that can create greater and chronic stress in our lives. And so CBT and DBT would look at how do we think and how do we shift that thinking. So here's how to challenge cognitive distortions. Some ideas for this. I think I have these uploaded into D2L. Just asking the self questions. How do I know if this thought is accurate? I'm taking everything I think as being true, absolutely. But how do I know that? How do I know what I'm thinking is accurate? What evidence do I have to support it? How can I test my assumptions? Do I have someone I can check out these thoughts with? It's really good not to live in a vacuum. I am probably really big at this one. It's like, if I'm seeing something like this and it's got me like agitated or stressed out or irritated, I'll call up a friend who's in the field, who I really trust, and to give me a good and honest answer of the way they see things. Not an answer that's just going to placate me or make me feel good, but that's going to help me. They might say, "Yeah, I can get how you feel that way, but look at it this way." Someone who's not a misery loves company kind of friend, but someone who's going to really work through it with me. Is it a helpful thought? Are there other ways I can think about this situation or myself? So really working with our thinking for a while and bringing, a lot of our automatic thoughts are just come from automatic feelings that we have. And the thoughts and the feelings are so tied together that we don't really even think about them anymore. They just come. And so this is about really sitting down and bringing logic to bear on what's going through our mind. And sometimes that alone can shift the brain out of that functioning. All right, so thinking about everyday blues, not necessarily the some other things that can happen, and unfortunately, this did not show up nicely as it looked on my on my PowerPoint. But just a few things we can do also for just when we're just feeling down, kind of down in the dumps. See our doctor. Of course, there are some conditions, medical conditions that can trigger mood differences. Aerobic exercise. We know, exercise definitely will boost all kinds of things within us, endorphins and so forth that can make us feel better. Reduce alcohol. Alcohol can certainly stir up all kinds of emotions and bring things to bear that aren't necessarily the best for us. To get social, to actually, even though it might be hard, even if it's just one person, to go have tea with a friend or coffee with a friend or whatever works for you, to go do something with a friend, to get out of the box we can put ourselves in, get involved in something meaningful to us and purposeful to us, so that we can make a difference in our lives and others, and that can circulate happiness for us. Challenge that negative thinking. Practice gratitude. We're going to talk about some of this, and practice random acts of kindness. So we're going to get a little more into that kind of thing here in a minute. So in the next video, I'll talk about positive emotional and mental well-being. All right.